Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Shavi'is, Perek Aleph, Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Dalid. We left off on Daf Dalid, Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top of the Amud, beginning with the new Mishnah with Halacha Gimel. Now, we already learned above that for an entire area to qualify as a Sedei Ilan, as an orchard, which will allow the owner or any other Yid to plow that field on the 6th year up until Shavuos. And if it would not be qualified as an orchard, then they would only be allowed to plow that field on the 6th year only until Pesach. So we learned that that is a field that for every Beisah, you have to have 3 trees that produce the minimum of, if it were to be a fig tree, of 60 mana, Italian mana, of weight of produce. And as we mentioned already before, that this is a rule not only for the fig tree, but any other tree. And as we'll see now, even if it's a barren tree, there's a way of figuring out that if this would have been a fig tree, it would have produced that amount. That's called a stei ilan. The entire beisah is classified as a orchard. And if it doesn't have 3 trees, or if it has 3 trees, but it doesn't give that minimum amount of produce, so even though you will be allowed to plow under the branches and right around the tree, kimaloi oire vesaloi, which we said is 2 amas, up until Shavuos, but the rest of the land can only be plowed until Pesach. And all of this, Chavre, don't forget, is only during the time of Isu Shnei Perakim. I know, Omri, a lot of this sounds like Japanese, but that's what happens when you come late in the game, but you'll catch up. And Rabban Gamliel, whose Beis Din was established, he was the Rabban shortly after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. He abolished all of this Tosefes Shvius, as we already learned above. Now, what we're going to have in this Mishnah is going to be the ground zero of the machloikas of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael, that we began already to quote a few times since the beginning of this Masechta, that we have a pasuk in Parshas Kisisa. The pasuk speaks in the beginning for sure about Shabbos, Shesis Yomim Tavoid, Uvayoyim Hashvi'i Tishbois, and then Bechodesh Uvekotzer Tishbois, machloikas Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael. I don't have to repeat it right now because we said it before and we're going to have it here inside. We already learned above that when we spoke about the minimum of 3 trees in the Beisah, that there has to be the minimum distance of 4 amas in between each tree, as we're going to learn on tomorrow on Daf Hey, in order for the oxen and their instruments to be able to pass in between the trees. The question that the Gemara will discuss on the Daled Amud Beis is very simple. What happens if you have a Beisah, and in the Beisah, let's say you have 5 trees, not 3 trees, but the space in between the trees are less than 4 amas. So what do we do right now? So we're going to link this, and we're going to have a Gavaldik opportunity, a flashback to Masechtas Kalayim, where we had a very similar question, and there we had a Machlokas Tanoim, and the Gemara is going to say that the Machlokas Tanoim we had over there will apply over here. Just to quickly, in our intro, that in this the second part of the Masechta, not in the part of Kilei Zeroim, when we were learning about Kilei Akerim. So we had the general rule that if you have a vineyard, what's classified halachically as a vineyard, then the distance that you have to leave avoida, right, prior to planting any other type of legume, grain, etc., vegetable, if it's a kedem, 4 amas. If you have a single vine, not a kedem, all you need is 6 tefachim. And we learned, and what, it's not just a single vine. You can have many single vines, but they won't be classified as a kedem. So there also, we learned about a minimum space in between the rows. We also learned over there what were to happen if you have rows in the vineyard, but they are so close to each other that you don't have the minimum 4 amas. Royan oisam, you remove the middle ones or not, as we're going to say, whatever the machlokes you have over there, we're going to have over here. And finally, we're going to have some more that the Gemara will expound, Bishitas Rabbi Yishmael, that understands that that he understands that Bechodesh or Bekotzer Tishbois is referring to Shabbos, not to Shvius. The question is, Bechodesh or Bekotzer Tishbois, Lamates Malachas Tishbois. So he says, no, that the Torah is being Baram is that just like there is never a mitzvah connected directly to plowing, Chodesh is always Rishus. So the prohibition on Shabbos to harvest is only when it's a optional harvesting and not a mitzvah harvesting. When do we have a mitzvah to harvest? We have a mitzvah to harvest on the night going into the 16th day of Nisan. Mitzvah to harvest the barley night before you bring the Karban Omer. And if the 16th is on Shabbos, then you have a mitzvah to harvest the barley. And now the Gemara is going to say, and what were to happen? What do we do on the Shemitah year? Now make no mistake, Chavra, on Shemitah year, we're not allowed to plant. Not allowed to plant. But sfichim, something that grows by itself, is allowed to be harvested, not to accumulate it, but for me to eat, I can harvest not the way a farmer does, but the way an individual does on the Shemitah year. And indeed, that is the way it was done for the Karban Omer. And the same thing will be that the prohibitions of Ketzira that the Torah says as Sfiach Ketzir Chaloi Sixer and Parshas Bahar, Bachlal does not apply to the entire year of Shvius when it comes to a Ketzir mitzvah, as we will see inside. That's the daf until Mishnah Hey. So now let's go Chavre inside again. Daf Daled Amud Aleph, Mishnah Gimel, says the Mishnah. So the rule that we had above, that for every Beisah, which is 2,500 square amas, or 50 amas by 50 amas, that if in there you have 3 trees, we already learned in the last year that they don't have to be spread out equidistance. That we do not have in the sugya over here. Yes, they have to have minimally 4 amas apart. Other than that, according to some Amoraim, if you have a fence surrounding your Beisah, remember, even if the 3 trees are in one edge, even though we learned about the roots and 25 amas, there we did say loy plug, that entire Beisah is classified as a stay ilan. But the medvaram amurim, that's the Mishnah. If the 3 trees produces enough yield that you're going to have the weight in figs of 60 Italian money. So now says the Mishnah, to make it clear, it's not only fig trees, and it doesn't even have to be fruit-bearing trees. Echad ilan srak, even if you have, listen, non-fruit trees, and we learned already above that people, we know that they plant non-fruit-bearing trees for their lumber. And we also learned already above, Herst Omni, that when you plow a field, if the earth is still a little bit moist, it actually benefits the growth of that tree. It becomes a little bit thicker, and that's advantageous for the purpose. The tree itself is the peta. You want the tree for the lumber, the tree gets thicker, you have more lumber. And therefore, it's also asur. It's included in all of the laws of Shemitah, and therefore it's included in the laws of Toisefes Shvi'is. And if the 3 trees are ilan serak, or ve'echad ilan machol, or if it's any other fruit tree, not only figs, any other fruit, it always goes by the cheshbon of the figs. We have to look at this tree as if it was a fig tree, and then we apply the same rule. So it's one rule for all, which is im ru'uyim la'asos kikar devela. If from the yield, and we'll see clearly it's not from each tree. We already learned the Rambam in the last year. But you will see clearly here, it's already understood in the Mishnah, that if all of the produce from the 3 trees will give you a total of, people used to take figs, they used to press them for them to be preserved throughout the winter, throughout the summer. So if you can produce a cake of figs, of pressed figs, that has the weight of 60 Italian money, shisha money be Italki, and we said already, Omri, that why are we talking Italian? Because from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, all the way until the times of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the Italians did not change the size of their coinage, and that is not the case by Yidden. So that's why we use that as that standard, v'chulei. So we say that if you can do it, then the whole Beisah is called an orchard. Charshin kol Beisah b'shvilan. But if pachas mikan, but if less than 3, or you have 3, but they don't produce that minimum of 60 manabi talki, so then we say that the Beisah is not an orchard. The land can only be plowed until Pesach. But 1 second, you are allowed to plant. The logic is I can plow under a tree if it's benefiting the yield of the 6th year. And a chanami. But it's not the whole Beisah. But what could you do? Ein charshin lahem ela soirchan. Then you have to look at every tree individually and what type of plowing benefits that tree on the 6th year individually when you are plowing under the tree, not under the trunk, under the branches. And not only that, but around the branch area, the space that the fig picker needs with his basket, that one which is 2 amos, which will be enough. Now,
60 mon against the lumber tree.
We look at the lumber tree. The Gemara will be more elaborate. From the thickness and the length of the branches, we extrapolate that if this would have been a fig tree, that's what we do. Okay, now, the people in real estate have the same thing. Right? When Vlad looks at a building, you have to know the business. If this would have been that and the other, then it would do this. That you make these cheshbonis, but we're just not farmers. Now, here we go. If from the 3 trees, one of them is so gavaldic that it gives the whole amount, and 2 don't give anything, or even better, 2 of the 3 give, and 1 doesn't give, doesn't work. It's not that we want from every Beisah that amount. No, we want that that amount should come from the 3 trees. Then ein chorshen el letzarchan ad sheyiu shloisha, until all 3 produce that amount. And we're going to learn the sugya the way most learn. It's not that it has to come only from the 3. Is that every one of the 3 has to give an equal amount, which is a third, as we'll see. So every tree has to produce 20 mana. Because the 6th year, there was an understanding originally that Tosefes Shvius did not allow you to plow any field 30 days prior. That was their understanding before the Beis of Rabbi Gamliel. And the Chachamim went ahead and said that since we see from the Oibusher, you have to already be shoyves from Alechas HaKarka 30 days prior, we'll tell you better. We're going to add earlier, all the way to Shavuos, all the way to Pesach. People plow either for the yield of that, not the type, not the same type of plowing, mamish, but they plow, or they already begin preparing the land for the next year. So that's the logic. Any type of plowing that's for that year will be allowed. Any type of plowing that's be'ikir for the next year was asur midrabanan until that gezeda was abolished. Now, now let's halt cup. So it's not just about 3. What happens if you have more than 3? So let's go. I'll tell you the cheshbon. Let's go one by one. Let's say you have 4. And let's go with our understanding that the 60 mana has to come equal from each tree. You can have more than 60 mana. But if you have 3 trees, every tree has to produce 20 mana weight. Let me word it that way. So let's go. If you have 4 trees, then everyone has to produce 15 mana. Has to be equal or more. Because I'm not limiting the 60 mana. But I'm saying if I'm only going to hit the minimum has to come divided equally. Let's say you have 5 trees. So 5 tree is 12. A lot is here. I have to be careful, etc. I'll leave it at that. I can go on my head. Now, that is only if you have up until 9. But if you have 10 or more than 10, here comes the Gavaldik Chidish. Now you understand some spiritual concept of a minyan. Even if the 10 Jews that are getting together, externally, none of them have anything special to offer. Doesn't matter. You got a minyan. If you have 10 trees, none of them produce anything. Once you have 10 trees, that's called an orchard. How beautiful is that? Exactly. When you daven b'yechidus, does God listen to your prayers? God listens, but does he listen? And joining from Zoom does not count. But if you daven with a minyan, then you can be Chiyadam Eitz Asada. You can be an Eitz Asada that Eina Moisim, and you're good to go. In other words, the 60 mana requirement is completely waived. Now the word Shenemar, as the Gemara will point out, Mamish, the way the Yerushalmi is Mekatzer, normally you would think the Shenemar is for the last rule. The Shenemar doesn't go on the rule of 10. The Shenemar doesn't go on the rule of 3. The rule of 60 mana. Bechlal not. In other words, we're going back up. What are we going back up? We're going back up to the general concept. How do you know you can't plow in the 6th year? In Parshas Bahar, the Torah says 6 years work. 6 years work. On the 7th year, you rest. That is what the Shenemar is going. It doesn't go with the flow. It goes all the way back to the beginning of the rule. Shenemar. From where do we see this whole idea of Tosefes Shvius? Because since, again, this is the pasuk, in Parshas Kisisa, Sheishis Yamim Tavoid, Uvayoim Hashvi Tishbois, 6 days working, 7th-day rest is Shabbos. And in the same verse, it says, Bechadish ubekatzer, from plowing and from harvesting, you have to rest. So that's the ground zero. So Bechadish ubekatzer Tishbois. So
because they specifically gave us Kodesh and Katzir, that's why we assume it speaks about Shvi.
That's Rabbi Akiva. So it can't be Shabbos because Shabbos, Bechadish ubekatzer. Shabbos, you can't do this, you can't do any of the 39. So it goes about Shemitah. Can't be about Shemitah. Why can it not be about Shemitah? Because even though in Parshas Bahar, the Torah never explicitly said not to plow, but the Torah said explicitly later in Bahar that Sviach Ketzir Chaloi Siktzor. So for the Torah to say that you can't do Ketzirah, you have to rest, that's also superfluous. Must be that the Ketzir is going to prior to Shvius. And once Katzir is going to prior to Shvius, that's automatically, so Chadish, which is in the same breath, is also not speaking about Shemitah. It's speaking about prior to Shemitah. Like we explained, even though the word Chadish could have been used, but Katzir cannot be used, and since Katzir is not, neither is Chadish. Elot must be, like we said, both ways. Tosefes prior, Tosefes post. What's the Tosefes of Shemitah prior? Any type of plowing that you do on the 6th year that is primarily done for the benefit of that which will grow in the 7th year is also Mida Oiraisa, according to Rabbi Akiva. And like we mentioned, how much prior? 30 days. It was the Chachamim that added to that. And not only that is it prior, but the Katzir Shal Shvius, Shal Yoitzel Lamatzoi Shvius. There's a machlokes rishonim. We're going to consistently quote the majority opinion that if you have produce that grew on the 7th year, not because you planted it, or because you planted it, it grew, and it's a third ready on the 7th year, it's called produce of the 7th year. And therefore, if you do ketzira on the 8th year, you're allowed to do ketzira on the 8th year. Nevertheless, that produce is classified as Shemitah produce, and it's bound by the 2 rules. Number 1 is that you can't do proper business with it. We'll learn later about the dinim of Schoira B'Peida Shvius. And number 2, it has the Kedusha of Shemitah that's bound by the dinim of Biur, again, as we'll learn later in this Masech. Okay, now, all of that is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel foundationally argues with him. First of all, the Pasuk is speaking about Shabbos. Why we're not talking about Shemitah? So why did the Torah have to specify by Shabbos, B'Chodesh U'B'Katzin? And by the way, it's not unique, because you have in Parshas Vayakel, the Torah tells you that don't make fire. That's right. I know, l'lav yotzas, l'chalik yotzas, but you have certain malachas that are specified. You also have, according to most, the malacha of carrying. And yeah, the Torah is specifying Chodesh U'Katzir to tell you that we juxtapose them. Just like the act of plowing is always called Rishus, there isn't any act of plowing in the entire Yiddishkeit that is directly a mitzvah. It's all called Rishus. I know there are many things that in the avoid in the Beis Hamikdash we have to offer menachos, but that's preparatory. There's no mitzvah of doing Charisha. So when Hashem says don't plow on Shabbos, obviously he's speaking about plowing. Plowing is always discretionary. Af katzir, what type of reaping is prohibited? Only a reaping that's in the category of Rishus. And what does that exclude? Yotz katzir or omer. Katzir or omer means that you have to bring a carbon omer from barley on the 16th day in the Beis Hamikdash, and it needed to be harvested night prior. And if the 16th day is on Shabbos, then we are obligated. There is a mitzvah to reap the omer on Shabbos Kodesh. Af yotz katzir or omer. That what? That you do it. Okay. Gavaldik. Now, hold on. Just one thing that the Gemara doesn't say over here, but we have quoted from Bavli Moed Katan Dav Dalid that according to Rabbi Yishmael, is there Tosefes Shvius? So what the Gemara says over there in Bavli, not in the Yerushalmi, that it is Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, and therefore, according to the Bavli, this is important even after Rabban Gamliel abolished the takana. However, he did it. We learned the 2 ways that he did it. He only did it in the Bavli until 30 days prior. And that's a machlokes. And in the Yerushalmi, we learned already that once Rabbi Gamliel took away Tosefes Shvius, he took it away up until Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says befedish.
And what about Rabbi Akiva, what does he hold vis-a-vis the Omer?
Rabbi Akiva allows you to do the Omer. What's the source? I don't know.
Meaning, is there any dispute practically between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel about the Omer, or it's just a different limud of where he gets it from?
It's a different limud. And there is, not for right now, it's late, but we're beginning to learn the Rambam. There's huge differences, whether something is scripturally sourced, the same prohibition. Rabbi Akiva, b'chodesh u'b'katzav tishbois, is a pasuk prohibiting plowing 30 days prior, versus if something is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay, and let's go weiter, Daf Daled Amud Beis, and let's say like this. First of all, the Mishnah began by expounding the law of the 3 trees with the 60 manna, that it doesn't have to be fruit-bearing trees. That echad ilan srak. And then the Mishnah says, and even fruit-bearing trees, that we have to see royan oisai as if they are fig trees. What's the yichus of fig trees? V'lama amru te'enim. So the Gemara says, al yidei shepeidoseim gasim vehein oisim harba. First of all, fig tree, now, there are certain qualities that are not neged that we already learned together. A fig tree is never picked at the same time, if you remember that. But coming over here, number one, the fruits themselves are relatively large compared to other fruits. And one branch of a fig tree will produce more than other trees. Now, hold on. Let's say, I'm just giving you I want to explain what the Gemara is saying. Let's say that a peach tree would produce less. But why didn't we give the peach tree as the ground zero? Let's say 60 manna of figs from a fig tree. A gezunta tree of a peach would give, let's say, half. We could have used that. And a chanami, we're saying that. But we're making one standard, and then we're saying all the other trees make believe as if it's the fig, make believe it's as if that. Making believe roy and oisa is difficult. Using the fig tree as the mashal makes it easier. It's very easy to tell when you look at a fig tree how much it will produce. Other trees, it's not so clear. That's what the Gemara is trying to say. We're going by weight, not by value, because it doesn't make, because you can live in a place where figs are expensive. It's not about the price, it's about the health, the weight.
Can I ask you a question, Rabbi?
One second, Danny.
The weight question.
It's, yeah.
Mana is weight.
One is weight, yeah, not the value, just to give a weight, and they had a standard weight, so we use a coin. Yes, Danny.
If you're growing peach trees, like in your example, or apple trees, and they don't normally yield the volume of fruit that a fig tree does, are we saying that we should look at the apple tree or peach tree and imagine if it was figs, what would be normal for figs would be normal for apples?
No, on this tree, looking at the size of the branches of this tree, that the tree the way it is, the apple tree the way it is, if figs would come out of the branches, somehow we have to be a botanist. It's the easiest to use the fig as the mushel.
I understand, but I'm just saying is if let's just say this 60 pressed figs is an example of a good, healthy Gesundta fig tree.
Average, so, I would say an average tree. Really, by the way, that it's 20 mana. We learned in the Mishnah.
Okay, 20 per tree. So we take that equivalent and say, what would a nice, normal apple tree or peach tree
Don't say
be
nice,
as well?
Normal. Say this peach tree that I have, the way it is. If figs would be coming out, how much weight would the figs amount to? Somehow it's the easiest way to get to the right number. To imagine on an apple tree, how many peaches would come out is harder.
No. Okay, but I'm just saying, are we taking whatever's average for a fig tree and comparing it to what's average for a peach tree?
We're saying,
it has to be that volume of figs and then create that.
This tree, apples. Danny, look at the tree, the size of the tree. If this tree, the peach tree, if it would have been, if what's coming out of the branches would have been figs, from the size and the thickness of the branches, would the figs that would come out, would it amount to 20 mana? That's it. Okay. And in contrast, now again, the fig tree has two things. Number one, that the fruits themselves are large, and number two, that from the same branch many come out. Other trees, they don't come out that much from the same branch. So in contrast, an acidic tree, for example, even though we know peiros of gasin, and we know that actually acidic trees, people grow them here in the neighborhood. If you don't limit them, they can be humongous. But the branch doesn't produce a lot of esrogim in comparison to the fig trees. The other side, for example, an olive tree, LA is filled with olive trees. But every fruit, we're speaking about weight, is very little. It doesn't weigh a lot. They ain't pay the same gasim. Now, I don't care about that in itself. I understand, and therefore it makes it hard to imagine if this would have been an olive tree, how much I would have had. It's hard to get there. The elu, when it comes to the fig, to the te'ena, that's number one. And now the Gemara gives another reason that Amar Rabbi Bar Ada kol ilonaya of the shana parashana. Kol doesn't have to mean all, but it's common that trees are productive one year and the unproductive the next year. Like most people. Are you having a good year? Verstehst? What's unique about a fig? But the fig of the kol shana. Fig is the consistent idiot, the rigid guy, every day the same thing. That's the fig tree. So again, we're using a fig tree. It's all because it's easier to measure. Now you know that if you compliment the other person, a feig in Yiddish, I don't know why they use that. It's not used the way it's understood over here. Being a feig is a big compliment. It means that you're consistent, you produce, and you're big, and you have a lot come out of your branches, and every one that comes out in itself is a chaticha haruy lischabeit. Okay. No, the word. Yeah, for sure. In other words, oidam, just to know that in Lashon HaKodesh, in English, harvesting is harvesting. Here you have ktsir, you have mesika, you have bitsira, and what the word of harvesting by figs is oidam. And since we're using the fig as the ground zero, that's why we always say K'malo Oira V'Salah. I know that. Now here you go. But the Oira, Maloi Oira V'Salah is used dafka by the fig, but it's only a mashal. But it means two amas, and it's two amas no matter what. Okay. So the Mishnah came, the way we learned the Mishnah, that it's not just that you can't have two that make and one doesn't make. No, you need all three that produce. No, you need to have the minimum of 60 has to be equally divided. I can have 70. I don't need to have all the three giving exactly the same. But if I'm only going to have 60, I want to have three, I need to have 20 from each. That's what it means. I need to have at least 20 from each. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi b'shem Rab Chanina b'vad, that's the b'vad, shelo yitchois mecheshben mishulashim. Like what we just explained. In other words, it's not only that you have to have a total of all of the three have to produce. It's more than that. That every tree cannot give less than a third. I can have 3 trees, and I can have the weight of 100 mana of italki. Good. I don't need to divide the 100 equally. That I don't need. But the minimum amount has to be spread out minimally. So everyone has to give at least 20. And Ze'era bar Chinana Amar ubevad. So he was speaking about the final case of the Mishnah. When you have 10 trees, you don't have to have any produce. But when the Mishnah says from 3 until 9, so here again, I know Vlad is making the cheshbon. I did it on a calculator yesterday. Let's see who gets it quicker. I'm reading what I wrote. It's 6 2/3. 6 2/3 times 9 is 59.94. And don't jump on this. That's okay. Because all of the cheshbonos of Chazal are imperfect. They are to be rounded, al pi nigla.
So what does this mean? That if you have 9 trees, suddenly each tree could be much less
No, it's a 60 mana never changes. If you have 9 trees, you need to have 60 mana from the 9. So Ze'ira is agreeing with Rabbi, the same idea. It's not enough for you to have 9 trees in a total of 60. You need, if you have 9 trees, you need. Now, let me word it this way, Danny. If I have 9 trees, and let's say if 6 of them are not producing anything, doesn't bother me because now I have 3. If every one of the 3 gives 20, I'm good. Yeah. So good. If you don't have 20 from each one, doesn't matter because I have more than 3. It's once you have to have the 60 divided equally from what you have. Really, you only need to have 3. But if you have 3, you have to have 20 from each one. If you're using the 9, then each one has to give 6 2/3. What happens if one is not giving 6 2/3? That one doesn't count. If that one doesn't count, how many trees do you have now? Only 8. Now you have to divide the 60 by 8. And every one has to give the minimum of that. And I didn't use my calculator on 8, so that's up to you. Go schwitz. Now, here we said that you have to have 4 amas in between every tree. And if not, so here we go. Now, I'm going to give you a case. The Gemara is going to give you a case where you have 6 trees. That's going to be the case over here. And if you have 4 trees, 4 from the 6 guys, and the plow can pass in between. In other words, you have the 4 amas in between, but the other 2 trees, so you have 6 trees. Okay, Vlad? 4 of them are properly distanced. 2 of them are not properly distanced. If they're not properly distanced, so how do we look at those 2? As if they're 1. So you have to look as if you have 5 trees. So and then let's go back. And if you have chamisha, how much you need to have in 12? 12 would mean, let me just say what it means by 12. The 12 from each one of the 4. And from the other 2 together, 12. Not equal, because we look as if they're 1. That's what he's saying. We look at them keilu chamisha. The 2 become combined together. Now let's go weiter. You have 5 trees, and the problem here is that every single gap is less than 4 amas. You don't have any good gap over here. So where's Kavan with your maps? So you have to design this. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you were to remove 2 and 5, I said the 5 trees, right? If you remove 2 and 4, now between 1, 3, and 5, now you have 4 amas. Oh, so hoya chamisha. So can you do that? Do we do that? Do we say make believe as if the 2 and 4 are not here, and now you're good to go? This is the machlokes we had in the previous Masech, machlokes Tanoi. That's the flukta, the Rabban Shimon, and the Chachamim. The Tanin on Tamon, that's Kalayim, Perikei Halacha Beis, Kerem Shunu Tual Pachas Me'arba Ames. If you have a vineyard, and yes, you had rows, but the problem is that you don't have the minimum 4 amas in between the rows. Noch, we learned over there, it's in between the rows, excluding the trunks of the vines. So 1 second. So if you don't have a kerem, all you have to do now is keep all the other plantings 6 tvachim. If it is a kerem, you have to go 4 amas. You have 5 rows. Machlokes whether roy and oisa, you remove the row 2 and row 5, row 2 and row 4. Same thing like over here. Rabban Shimon Omer ain't a kerem. Right now, you don't have the minimum distance. You don't have a kerem. You do not have a kerem. When people plant vineyards too close to each other, as we witnessed, what happens is that none of the vines give their ideal yield. So the farmer is going to uproot some of the rows. And Rabbi Shimon says over there, you don't know which one he's going to uproot. So therefore, the way it is right now will not be. It's not a kerem. We view it as individual vines that were meant lechatchila to be planted, for them to grow a little bit, for them to be uprooted, for them to be replanted. Now it's not replanted yet. The Chachamim say no, it has a din of a kerem. Why? Because v'royin esam tzoyis ki'ilu einam. Because what you do is that you say, now let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Row 2 and row 4, the whole row will be the ones that will be uprooted. So you have 3 rows. A kerem of 2 rows is a vineyard. A kerem of 3 rows is called a kerem gadol. So you have a kerem and you're good. So mamish, the way they say it over there, same thing over here. In other words, according to the chachamim of royin oisam, how many trees do you have, guys? You have trees 1, 3, 5. And when you have trees 1, 3, 5, what do we want? The other 2 are not even here. I don't care whether they give produce, whether they don't, they're not counted. You have to have at least 20 mana of weight from 1, 3, 5.
The tree, the 2 and 4 are not uprooted. We just imagine them now.
That's Lamal Yusa. That's giving you a heter. And according to Rab Shimon, you don't have a stay Elon. You only are allowed to plow under and around these 5 trees, and the rest of the land has a din of a stay lavan, which means that you can't plow already from Pesach. Gewaldig. Beautiful. Now we're turning to the Afek. We're going to learn until the Mishnah. So now we learn, once you have 10, the Chorshen called base Sa'a B'Shvilan. And if you read the Mishnah, the next line in the Mishnah is Shenemar B'Chodesh U'B'Kotzer Tishbois. And the flow b'chlal doesn't work. The Mishnah is telling you what you are allowed to do. Shenemar, a pasuk, what you're not allowed to do. In other words, says the Gemara that the shenemar lo yasya the law al reisha doesn't work if you won't say that it's going back to the reisha. Appreciate the way the Gemara is expressing itself. It won't work. In other words, the Gemara is not happy with the fact that Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we don't know why, didn't flow. He's telling you the heter. If you have 3, you're good. It's better. You have more time to plow. When you have 10, it's even better. You don't even need anything. Shenemar, the loyas, if it's not going to the rule that we learned before, what's the rule that we learned before? That you b'chlal cannot plow even on the 6th year from some point prior. And by the way, Rabbi never said that explicitly. That's why it's even harder to say that the shenemar goes on a halacha that Rebbe never said. Rebbe only implied the halacha, but there's no option. The lo yasid the lo reish. That what? That ain't choshon lehem el l'tzarchan. L'tzarchan means that you can't go beyond. You can't go beyond l'tzarchan. Why not? Why not? It's a 6th year. Shenemar b'chodesh u'b'kosar tishbois. And here we have Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Shmuel. All beginning with the Ein Tzarech Loimer. Okay, so Rabbi Shmuel holds that it's going on Shabbos. Rabbi Kiva says Ein Tzarech Loimer. In other words, it's going to Shemitah, but even on Shemitah, it's not going to the Shemitah itself, because Ein Tzarech Loimer, and really the Katzit is not needed for Shemitah. It must be Tosefes before and after. Rabbi Shmuel says, no. Rabbi Shmuel says that it's going to Shabbos. The flow of the pasuk is perfect. And the Torah is actually giving you a heter that what type of ketzira may not be done must you rest from only if it's rishus, like Chodesh is always rishus. So Rabbi Shmuel kedate. Now we're going me'ingen le'ingen, and that is, now let me tell you something, guys. If one would have been allowed to bring produce from outside the Holy Land for in the Beis HaMikdash, one would be allowed to do so, then there never would have been an issue when it comes to the bringing of the Omer, and really the Shtei Halechem with how are you going to bring it. The Gemara is not going into all of the details. How do you bring the Omer? So the fact that you can't plant on the 7th year is not a problem, because every field has a residual, has some insurance, grows by itself. You don't work like the Gabi, doesn't have to work. The
aftergrowths.
Aftergrowths. The problem is that it's hefker. So we had that whole thing that you have to put shoymrim. You have a simple solution. Go to Syria. Don't forget that David HaMelech conquered Syria. Syria is called Aram Tsoiva. Look at the Hashgacha Pratis that we are initiating Yemois HaMashiach by expounding the borders of the land that God gave to the Jewish people. We are now in Syria. Expanding, okay, on Nishkaferlech. And the whole question of why Taka isn't Syria or Syria, why isn't it Eretz Yisrael proper? Because the Gemara tells us that we consider his conquest as Kibush Yachid with the Machlokes. Why is it called the Kibush Yachid? Rashi and Tosfos, whichever way you want to learn, we don't view Syria as bona fide Eretz Yisrael as of yet, even though it was annexed. Huh? No.
However, we do.
No, 1 second. Now, 1 second. Since it's not Eretz Yisrael proper, Mamish proper, so you cannot bring the produce from Syria to the Karbanos, to the Beis HaMikdash, which means, now, if you would be able to do it, there'll be another advantage. Aside of the fact is, how do you even have produce that belongs to any individual? Aside of that, we're not allowed to harvest. You can't harvest properly. Now, you can harvest individually, in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, if one would have been allowed to bring the carbon omer from Syria, you resolve many challenges that you have on the Shemitah here. But you can't do that. You have to bring it from Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't matter. It's bechlal not a problem. Just like we see from Rabbi Yishmael, that on Shabbos, and not in the seventh year, any year, I'm obligated to harvest the barley Friday night. Why? Because the Torah here is telling me that it's excluded from Melecha Shabbos. Shabbos and Shemitah, we already learned before, is the same idea. We learned in them from each other. So that's that. Rabbi Shmuel Amar, it goes kedate, that he has no problem by saying that Ein ha'omer ba misuria, and he doesn't consider the alternative a problem because it's not a problem. Harvest gesund hate from Eretz Yisrael. Why would you not be allowed to harvest? Because the Torah says loy sikzer. No, loy sikzer is it if it's not mitzvah related. If it's mitzvah related, it's not, just like it's not included in Isur Shabbos, it's bechlal not included in the Isur of Shemitah. And we have another 2 minutes. Right. So let's go learn. Look at that Asher, you're on the right column, 7 lines from the bottom. And indeed, Vahacha paid in Menachas, right? Where do we have him? In the Bavli, we have on Daf Ein Hey Menachas, Rabbi Yishmael, that Moichachina Nahach Mas Nisan, that just like we find the Rabbi Yishmael. Now I know when it comes to exceptions, what you could do on Shabbos, you have the Chuya, you have Hutra. Really, by Shabbos, you have this third category. The words that we have in the Gemara is the Chuya, that the Kiven the Dachi Shabbos, just like we see from Rabbi Shmuel explicitly, that it's Doiche Shabbos, Ktsir Oimer is Doiche Shabbos, Vaday Svinolei, that the Chol Sholei Nixar Kimitzvasoi Pasol. Listen, it's Doiche Shabbos, not Hutra Shabbos. If you would be allowed to bring the Oimer from Surya, then it wouldn't be Doiche Shemitah. And he says that it is Doiche the Shemitah, because he holds that you can't bring it, even b'di'evad you can bring it from Syria, because the Salka Daita, that Nixa, Shlokim Mitzvah say that if you would have brought it in a non-ideal way, for example, bring it from Syria, if b'di'evad would have been kosher, then on my Dachi Shabbos, when it comes to Shabbos, Nixa Erev Shabbos, Shabbos itself. Why didn't you say bring it from Erev? Hashem wants you to do it the night before. Okay, but if b'di'evad, if you didn't, if it would have been kosher, then we would have said don't break the Shabbos. That's called Chuya, not Hutra. If it's Hutra, you wouldn't say that. Elam midedachi Shabbos, shmamina, that Nixa shleikim mitzvasai, even b'di'evad it's possible. So therefore, the same thing over here, that by Korbanoi Sibur, unlike the other Tanoim that hold that b'di'evad, if you would have brought a mincha from out of Eretz Yisrael, it would have been good. No, he holds, that's the real link. He holds that there's no b'di'evad in the Beis HaMikdash. It has to be lachatchila. And it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? Because the Torah is allowing me to do ketzira in the Shemitah year when it comes to a mitzvah. And with that, we conclude. God willing, to be continued tomorrow.
And everybody agrees to that. Even Rabbi Akiva.
Everyone agrees to that. In other words, l'chu'ura, that according to Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yehuda, that he brings down over here in the Rashirilio, if something that's not done kimitzvasa is kosher, then maybe you bring it from Syria.
But how are you going to get it from Syria down to Yerushalmi?
Because you bring it before, Danny.
I thought it has to be harvested the night before.
Yeah, but that's only lechatchila. According to the ones that hold b'di'evad, it's good. If there is such an option, then we wouldn't be so quick in saying that you do that which is prohibited. Because when you're doing a lechatchila here, but you're breaking the law over there, if it's only